Chapter 2. The Keel Rite. The temple kept a fixed price for proving that a man believed in God, and Cassian Marl had paid it every spring for 20 years. The whole schedule hung on the door of the Rite house at the harbour stairs, vellum gone amber under a century of varnish. So much for the ringing of a keel under 40 tons, so much over, so much for a house's first proving, so much to have a reader's attendance entered under seal. The prices were quoted in temple marks, a coin no mint had struck in 200 years, so that paying them required a changer, and the temple kept a changer in the porch at a rate the temple set, and none of this was written anywhere, and it had outlived 4 dukes. "The mark stands a shade dearer this spring," the changer said at the porch, as he said every spring. "It always does," Marl said, and paid, and took his chit down the stairs into the smell of low water. The Rite ran with the tide. Once a year, on the last good ebb before the declaration was looked for, the sea pulled back and showed the city the bottoms of its ships, and the priests went out along the mud where the hulls sat propped in their cradles, and one house at a time, oldest first, a master climbed down into the weed and the dripping dark under his own keel and proved his standing. The proving was simple. You laid the house iron flat to the keel, where the great timber ran up into the stem, and you said the Rite verse, 11 words in the sacred tongue, and if you said them truly, the iron rang. It should not have worked once. A span of old steel laid against wet wood by a cold hand, and at the last word it sounded, every year, a clean bronze note that had no business coming out of either the steel or the morning, a note that carried over the mud and the weed and the resting hulls like the temple's own bell made small. 100 and some houses would ring before the tide turned. The whole city came down to hear it, bareheaded, the harbour quarter in its red felt caps with the caps in their hands, and the gulls went up off the mud at each note and settled and went up again, and nobody alive had ever thought to find any of it strange. It rang because it had always rung, as bread rose and babies came. The one wonder of the morning, by common agreement, was the price on the door. Marl stood in the queue at the stairhead with his iron wrapped in oiled linen under his arm, and watched the temple bar 2 houses in front of the entire city, with nothing in its hands but a list. It was done quietly. There was a table at the head of the stairs, and a clerk at the table with the roll of standings, and beside the clerk a reader in sea green, the hem of his robe weighted with small beads of lead, so that the silk hung as still as standing water in the morning wind, and nothing on him moved but his feet. Marl knew him by the hem before he knew him by the face, the same reader who walked the water stairs with a wax tablet, the one the harbour had learned this spring to go quiet around. When old Natan Vel Aram came to the table, iron under his arm, the clerk found his name on the roll and did not look up. "Standing under review," the clerk said. "The house will not prove this year." "Review," Natan said. He was past 70, and he had rung that keel himself for 40 springs. "Review of what? Name the matter, and I will answer it." "The review names its own season," the reader said, pitched just under the wind so that the whole stairhead had to go still to hear him, and went still. "It is not a finding, master. Nothing has been found." And that was all. No charge, no gate slammed, no soldiers, only a name unfound on a roll, and a house of 4 keels and 60 men was out of the year through which all years are fed. The Veltessa brothers got the same sentence in the same flat courtesy 2 places later, and took it worse, the younger one saying loudly that his grandfather had hauled stone for the breakwater the readers walked on, which was true, and helped nothing, because there was no one to argue with. The crowd on the stairhead stood attentive and silent, men absorbing the news that this could be done, to anyone, at no cost, by a list. Natan Velaram carried his iron back up through that silence with his face perfectly composed, holding the wrapped bundle the way a man holds a grandchild asleep, and Marl, waiting his turn in the queue, did not catch his eye. And the not catching was a transaction both of them had done before and would do again, and it cost what it always cost. Then it was his own name, found on the roll without trouble, and the stairs, and the weed smell, and the dark under the obedience Keel. She was a 60-ton coaster, the one Keel the Marl house held outright, and she had come with the name already on her. He had kept it because it cost nothing, and reassured everyone. He kept her, if he was honest, in the place where he priced things for exactly one morning a year. This one so that once a year, in public, at the rate posted on the door, Cassian Marl could prove he believed. He laid the iron to the keel. The wood wept cold on his wrist. Above him, on the mud, faces. At the stair, the sea-green robe and the leaded hem that did not move. He had drilled the verse the winter he decided to become Cassian Marl, drilled it as a study, the vowel quantities of a dead liturgical tongue reconstructed from 3 sources a broker of letters could lay hands on and a priest could not, because priests learn their grace at 9 from other priests and never once think about where the length of a vowel lives. It was the best philology of his life, and no one would ever know of it. 11 words. He gave the 3rd its full weight, which the dock priests clipped. He let the 7th fall where the old meter wanted it, off the beat the processional had taught the city. He said the 11th word into the wood. The iron rang. It rang clean and bronze and unreasonably loud, the full note, and it hung in the dark under the hull a half-breath after the iron had left the wood. Iron does not do that. Sound does not do that. He stood with the note dying around him and the hair on both arms standing up inside his sleeves, and hated it, the hair, the standing, all of it, the body's stupid insistence on awe in a place where he knew to the syllable what had been done and how. Breath and quantity and a dead language's table manners. A trick, performed correctly. That the trick rang was the temple's embarrassment, since it meant their grace answered to any throat that took the trouble. That it had hung too long was the morning's damp, or the cradle's timbers, or nothing. He came up the stairs with the iron under his arm, and the reader at the table was looking at him. A stylus paused over wax for the length of one held breath, the exact length, it occurred to him later, that the note had hung. Then the entry was made, standing proven, the note fair, and the lead-weighted hem turned away down the table, and Cassian Marl walked up into the city through the crowd's bared heads with his hands, he observed from a small distance, shaking. They shook every spring. He had 20 years of calling it fear, and one morning a year when the name would not quite stretch over it.